Bootstrapping your startup without relying on outside capital and loans is an ideal strategy, especially given the current investor and banking landscape. And our guest is a seasoned founder and investor and mentor, and she's sharing the best advice to help you launch and build your startup without raising capital. Get ready for a delicious conversation on the Startup Life Live show. Let's glow, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Startup Life Live show. I'm your host, Ande, Lyons, 4 times founder and startup champion to founders around the world. And after raising 4 businesses of my own, I have a really good idea of what you founders are waking up to every single day. And boy, am I in awe and wonder of you and your resilience and tenacity and perseverance, and just like a woo for you. And I'm also truly grateful that you carved out time to tune in to the show, because I know that there are days where you're getting up and you're popping that champagne and you're feeling great and you're sleeping through the night like a log. And then there are those times when you're sleeping like a baby through the night, right? Waking up every few hours crying. This is not an easy journey that you're on. And I have a deep appreciation. So thanks for tuning in and upping your founder game, because as you do better, your startup is going to do better. A big yoo-hoo and mwah to the live viewers, to the replay viewers, and podcast listeners. I'm blowing you kisses from Boston and wishing you a delicious day, and so thrilled that you're here. If you're tuning in via video, wherever you're tuning in from, because we're live on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube, be sure to hit the like button, because that shoots the video out into your social atmosphere. And who knows who might be tuning in and hearing all the goods that they might need from this event and this show. If you are on YouTube, if you could please click that subscribe button and the bell notification, that would be wonderful. And if you haven't done so already, hop on over to Meetup and join the Startup Life Live Meetup group. This way you'll receive an alert whenever I post a new show, and I give you a deep dive into each of the guests, what we're going to be talking about, what we're doing, etc. So it's a wonderful way to find out if this is the time for you to tune in, okay? And ask questions, because questions are so important. I also want to remind everybody who is in the US, and if you're a female-owned business and you need help with that WeBank application, I am here for you. I have helped dozens of female founders fill up that pesky application. It is so difficult, and it is a wonderful way for you to get more opportunities out there. There are government contracts and large corporate contracts that want to do business with women-owned businesses. So don't leave any money on the table. If you're a B2B US company and you want to find other avenues to revenue, reach out to me, okay? Ande at andelyons.com. All right, so I am ready to share with you this wonderful guest that we have. Yeah, she is from Australia, but she's visiting the States today in New York City. And so we got her here on the show, easy breezy for her. And it's the wonderful Melissa Widner. And she's the CEO of Lighter Capital, the pioneer and leader in revenue-based financing for tech startups, founders, and companies. Previously, Melissa was the managing director of NAB Ventures, which is the VC arm of the National Australia Bank. And she was a general partner at Seattle-based SeaPoint Ventures. A seasoned founder, Melissa has firsthand experience building a business from the ground up. She was the founder and CEO of 7 Software, a Silicon Valley-based enterprise software company acquired by Concur. I mean, we're talking exit here, folks. I'm so excited to bring her in the room and share her all the way from Sydney, Australia, via New York City. Hello, Melissa Widner. Welcome to the show. Woohoo!
Thanks, Ande. That was the most enthusiastic reception I think I've ever had on a podcast.
Well, it's so exciting to have you here. Your background is amazing and ideal for the Startup Life Live audience. How is it that you ended up going to Australia, moving to Sydney? Like, have you always lived internationally? Tell us a little bit about that decision.
Well, I say I had a verbal prenuptial agreement, and that's how I ended up in Australia. My husband is Australian. He spent a long time in the US, where I met him and lived here for a long time. And I had agreed I would go live in Australia at some point. And I said, I'll try it for a year or two. And that was in 2009. But I kind of split my time, but Australia's home.
Oh,
It's a pretty good place to live.
it's a beautiful place to live, Melissa. I visited once. It was phenomenal. I loved every minute. I went immediately to the zoo because that view that the giraffes have is
Yeah, I
amazing.
know. Absolutely.
And then we also went up to the coral reefs, Port Douglas and Cairns, and did some reef snorkeling, and it's just magical. Went into the rainbow forest. It's a beautiful country. I'm glad you're here in New York City and that you're not, in the middle of the night doing this with us today. Hey, I'm going to say hi to a few folks. Hello, Julia Roon. Julia is part of this incredible organization called WOCON. So it's even more than that, right, Julia? Put some information into the comments thread so I can share with everybody. But it's really helping women of color connect, building their social capital. And it's run by Jill Johnson, and she does this incredible work in the world. And I know there's a longer name for the whole company, but it's not coming to my mind right now, Julia. So if you could pop that in, that would be great. And Jennifer, so happy to see you. She says, I'd love to visit Australia someday. Jennifer, by the way, Melissa, is doing phenomenal work with children through a character. And Jennifer, pop the URL into the comment section so I can share that with everybody as well. Because folks, in the Startup Life Live show, I love to amplify your startups and your brands online. So people listening down the road for years to come can find you and learn about all the wonderful things you are doing. And do not hesitate to pop any questions or comments or let us know where you're hanging out in the world. We would love to know. And then Brent from Ottawa, Canada, our loyal fan who always reminds us that disabled folks need to be at the table, especially those with invisible disabilities, our neurodiverse folks. They are really adding value and often are not at the table. So just want to thank you, Brent, for always reminding us to include diversity in all of our decisions. And thank you, Jennifer. She has this company called MoodyMonster.com. Moody is a buddy to help kiddos better cope with their frustrations. Intelligence is really important. And especially for neurodiverse folks and understanding how to articulate what's going on. So
I'm going to write that one down.
Okay.
Kids.
MoodyMonster.com. Anyway, let's get into all the goods and all the delicious things going on in your life. I always love to find out, what called someone initially to this wild and crazy world we live in, entrepreneurship. What called you to start your first business and become an entrepreneur? And Melissa, did you have role models, or were you that person hustling in third grade? I mean, how did this happen?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say my parents weren't really entrepreneurs, not traditional entrepreneurs. So I didn't have that kind of role model. A lot of entrepreneurs you talk to, they grew up in entrepreneurial households. Their grandparents were entrepreneurs. But I would say it was always encouraged. But I was that kid in third grade, probably more in fifth grade. I think my neighbors would not open the door and turn off the lights because we were always selling stuff. We were always making things and selling them. And I had my first business was stuffing envelopes when I was 10 years old, and that was just for it was for a local company, and I asked them if I could take them home, and I got paid, I remember, 70 cents 100, and I would take them home to the neighborhood and get the local kids to do it for the third graders for 50 cents 100 and bring them back. And that was my first business. So I was entrepreneurial, but I taught the class at University of Washington's MBA program for a year on entrepreneurship. So I studied it a little bit. I was filling in for a teacher who was on a gap year. And I found that, a lot of very successful entrepreneurs weren't entrepreneurial as kids, weren't even entrepreneurs in their 20s or 30s, and came to it later. So you don't have to be that third grader,
That's
with the
right. You
stand
don't
to become an entrepreneur.
And some folks get to it reluctantly. Hello. Or accidentally. Yep, that's me too. I had a zero product market fit or founder fit, I should say, founder market fit with any of my businesses. So I understand. And I love that. So when you went to start your software company, how did that come about? And was it a .com? Were you part of the .com boom, or was it before?
It was just slightly before the dot-com boom, which was really a short time, because
Yeah.
we started the company in 96, and it was kind of like 98 where things got really crazy, and then 99 and 2000 where they were through the roof, and then 2001 it was all over. So no, it was not a .com. I remember at the time thinking, God, we should just put .com behind our name because we saw these companies getting crazy valuations. It was an enterprise software company.
Yeah.
And it came about. So prior to that company, I ran a turnaround company that was an industrial supply company. It was a manufacturing company. And I did that in my early 20s before business school, and then went to business school. And I spent my summer after my first year at Goldman Sachs and learned about like technology valuations and how those were much higher than industrial supply company valuations, and had an opportunity to start this company to automate procurement. And it was at a time when the internet was fairly new, and it was
Very
basically,
new.
yeah, it was basically automating procurement for large companies. And it was a product, or the idea came out of Microsoft. It was created for internal use. So my co-founder created it for Microsoft. He was at Microsoft at the time, and he created it for internal use there. And they used to showcase it for, we've saved $35 million using this new technology to automate procurement. And he said, people would always say, where do we buy that? And he'd have to say, look, we're not selling it. We're showing what you can build with Microsoft tools, and Microsoft, this is what you can do with Microsoft tools. But it was so obvious there was a business there. So
and they let him like take that technology and go?
Yeah, I mean, John Connors was the CIO at the time, and we had to get sign off, but he had to redevelop. I mean, the technology was developed for Microsoft in-house. So it was more the idea, it had to be redeveloped to be used generally, but they were, really excited. I mean, you go back, Microsoft was accused of having missed the internet. So they were excited to get technologies out there that were built on their platform. So very supportive and a good partner. And then we ended up in a really hot space. It became a very hot space. Ariba, Commerce One, were other companies that came onto the scene at that time. So we had a really good exit. And actually, with my industrial supply company, we had a really good exit as well. We returned 15x to the investors. With Seven Software, it was over a 10x to the investors.
Nice.
And yeah, I mean, it was good, and it was hard, but I went on to become an angel investor and then a venture capitalist. And I funded entrepreneurs who, were a lot smarter than I am and worked a lot longer and harder than I did and didn't have those kind of exits. So, luck and timing really does play a big role.
It really does, because again, when was your exit with the software?
We were acquired in 90. The exit was 99, but we were acquired in 98.
Okay. So now you're coming out, and it could have been a great time to lose some money as an investor, because 2000 is when the bubble burst. But perhaps you went on to invest in companies during the 2000s where you were able to help some tech companies.
I went and joined a venture capital firm in the beginning of 2000, and then the world changed, really rapidly. Sort of started changing in March of 2000, and then 9/11 and was kind of the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a tough time to be in venture, going from grow, hire, spend to really pull back, which it's I think a lot of it feels similar to what's going on today, but there's a difference in that there's a lot more dry powder today. There's more dry powder today in venture than in the history of venture capital. And dry powder is money that venture funds have committed but haven't deployed yet.
Okay.
So hopefully we won't see like a long nuclear winter, which really happened after the
with
crash.
With our .com, we had a firm 5 million additional capital coming in from a well-known at the time VC firm. And when it was supposed to be getting wired in, everything had been signed off,
Yeah.
They had to let us know that they were insolvent.
Oh, jeez.
It's
No.
like things like because the bottom fell out. It was wild. And then of course that just helped us go right down with everybody else by the fall of 2000. And
Yeah.
so that was an incredible experience.
Yeah, I always, when things are going well and you don't want to take capital because you think it's always there. And I'm talking about this is for companies that are burning
Yeah.
and are going to need, burning a lot and will need capital to get to whatever, to revenue or to the next point. I just don't remember a lot of companies. Actually, I can't name a single one who said my regret is taking too much money. But I mean, but so many of them in sort of that,
Hindsight. Yeah.
2001, 2, and 3 time period said, oh God, I just wish I had taken it while the getting was good.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
it's a lesson. If you need money to grow, get it while you can, because things can change. And I know even in our business at Lighter Capital, things have changed dramatically in the last year.
Right. Oh my gosh. And then with the banks going, through what they're going through. Hey, listeners and viewers, Julia came back with all the information on WOCON. It's their Women of Color Connecting program. We have a multi-city tour coming up in June. They're going to be in Boston, August 3rd, and where we connect entrepreneurs focused on growth, scale, exit with investors and other business service providers who can aid in their growth exit. And this is a program of the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership that I was having a hard time remembering. And be sure to check them out at weareifel.org and WOCCON.org. Oh, thank you so much, Julia, for putting that out there. This organization has been around for a long time, and its leader, Jill Johnson, is remarkable, and what she's doing to increase visibility and success for women of color and people of color, and also training for angel investors as well among the Black community is just terrific. So I find all of this fascinating, how you got to where you are today, because you got inside the VC world, you saw what it was like, and that getting the money is great, but it also shortens the runway. It's a lot of pressure on founders. I've seen founders just choke. They did a great job raising the money, and now they're like, and all of a sudden it's just too hard for them to get things going because they're just overwhelmed by that responsibility, etc. Can you share some of the stories that you saw, of what worked when someone raised capital and what didn't work? And then we're going to go right into bootstrapping and learning more about Lighter Capital.
Yeah. So, in fact, I was just at an event this morning here in New York at a VC's office, and it was for women entrepreneurs, but one of the people in the audience asked the VC, they said, what are you looking for in today's market in terms of companies that are, maybe slower growth, but they're focusing on profitability? And how are you looking at that? And the VC firm gave a really honest answer, which is, sometimes we have to have a tough conversation with them. While they all want long runways, they want high growth. So they don't want VC-backed companies. The VCs do not want, the companies to slow down, and their model, they need to have, 1 or 2 companies return the fund. Plus, their model is to really push the companies to grow quickly. And a lot of times that puts a lot of risk on the companies where, there could be a very solid business growing at a decent clip. But because in the VC model, you've got to shoot for that unicorn or that 10x, growing at 20% year on year and profitable just is not interesting. It's not going to get them the exit. So if you're taking venture money, you're saying you're going to go down that path, and it is a riskier path.
It is. It's a lot riskier, but some of the companies out there are going to need that level of capital and that level of support. As a female VC, those of us who, I've been watching the VC industry for 30 years. That's how old I am. And, we had a lot of the VC world launch here in Boston. It used to be the hub for venture capital. And so I've seen a lot of firms bring women partners on to show that they're just not a bunch of white guys with the money. But they don't often give that woman any authority to sign a check, to make decisions, etc. And now as you know, and we got the report out last month about how only even less money is going to female founders who have such a great proven track record. What are your thoughts around that? How do you see this landscape ever changing in the VC world?
Yeah, so when I started in venture, there were very few women in venture. And what's really nice and good to see now is it has changed a lot. And it's changed at the junior level, but there aren't a lot of firms now, and certainly any firms of size that don't have somebody on the investment side, don't have some women on the investment side. I mean, the numbers are still abysmal, but it is so much better. I mean, for 10, 12 years, we saw zero change there was just no change. We weren't seeing any movement there. So it's great that we're seeing the movement, even though it's at the junior level. I mean, I have called out, especially in Australia, funds that say we do have female partners, because that's the, how many females do you have at the partner level? And if they're talking about their CFO or their head of community, who they've given a partner title, which are really important roles in a venture firm, but they're not, those roles a lot of times have always been held by women. So that wasn't where the gap is. So, we really want to see a change in women who are writing the checks. And I think because there's so many now at the junior level, that I think that it is changing, which is nice to see. And in terms of the dollars going out, so I co-founded an organization in Australia called Heads Over Heels in 2010 that supports women entrepreneurs running high growth companies by helping them get connected to the types of organizations and people that can help them grow, with the premise that women are not as well connected in general as men, and connected in the way that you need to be, to help your company grow. But there's been big change since 2010. And even though you look at those dollars that go to venture capital dollars that go to female companies, the overall dollars don't look great. They're still 4%. It still looks terrible. But a lot of the reason for that is that the dollars that go out the door, a lot of the really big checks are going to companies that are larger and, further along. So companies that are getting 500 million or $1 billion in money. But if you were to look at the number of women getting funded, number of women-led companies getting funded today versus 10 years ago, and just even the percentage of companies that are run by women getting funded, it's grown a lot. And, hopefully we'll see those companies grow up and they'll be raising as much money, or maybe women are just much more efficient and they can get to that IPO without raising a lot of money.
I love that too. Thank you for helping us have a little bit of a silver lining in all of that and looking at the numbers a little differently, because here in the States, 1.9% is just abysmal. And we're just seeing a lot of lip service around this. And I think it really needs to come downstream, in my opinion. Those LPs that are funding the funds need to say this percentage of money needs to be earmarked for female founders only.
Until that change, or I mean, I've been saying this for a while, until the LPs, as soon as the LPs, who are, the pension funds, the family offices, say we're only going to fund companies that have diverse
portfolios,
diverse partners. I mean, forget
partners.
The okay, because I do think when people writing checks start to be diverse, you're just going to see the follow on from that. For them, they need to demand that for real change to happen, and they are. I mean, your funds are starting to have to report on that. The NVCA reports on it. So finally, change is happening. We'd all like it to happen faster, but it is happening. And I wouldn't have said the same even sort of 6 or 7 years ago.
Excellent. Okay. I love the level of optimism I'm hearing from you, Melissa, and we need it. And I will send that ripple out to everybody. Melissa Widner was on the show and she shared, because we need to keep us from feeling discouraged. And folks, think about how long it took the women to get the right to vote, the Civil Rights Act. There can be no giving up, okay? Sometimes when change has to happen, it just takes years and concerted, focused effort, and it's always from the ground up, right, Melissa?
And yeah, and one thing that's been really encouraging to me when we started Heads Over Heels in 2010, this wasn't a big topic, but we started it, my co-founders and I started it because we saw such a need in the market. And it was really when Sheryl Sandberg published Lean In that this became more commonly discussed. And it was okay, it didn't have to be discussed quietly and in the back room, that this became something that men were discussing as well, which was good. And I thought, okay, we've got to take advantage of this time, because we've got to make hay while the sun's shining, because this isn't going to be an issue that a lot of men are really interested in. It's kind of the issue of the day now, but it's actually been kind of on the forefront for the last decade. So it doesn't seem to be going away, which is good in terms of how do we make meaningful change here.
That's right. And I want to see a scorecard, frankly. I want to say, so-and-so from VC, managing partner said this on this date about they're diversifying their portfolio. Yeah. And here's the action steps they took. I want that scorecard. So that
there are Australian funds are really good at measuring and reporting on how many female led or co-founded companies they fund. I will say, when I was at NAB Ventures, I was a managing director at National Australia Bank's venture fund, and most of our companies that we funded were run by men. But that was where there were two senior partners and one was a woman. So what we started doing is with our investment committee, we started reporting quarterly on the number of companies we were meeting with, pipeline companies that were run by women. And when you start reporting, you start looking at, okay, if these numbers aren't good enough, what do we do to fill our pipeline? So we were never going to fund a company that didn't meet our not minimum criteria, but one that we weren't excited about just because it was funded by a woman. But we looked at what can we do to increase the pipeline? And I think when you start measuring things is when you see real change. In 2000, I'm going to get the year wrong, but let's say 9, 10, or 11 in Australia, they started not requiring, but they started requiring the disclosure of public companies. They had to list in their annual disclosures. This was the ASX 200, which would be like Australia's S&P 500. They had to list the number of women they had on the board, and they had to report on it. And there was no requirement saying you have to have one or you have to have a certain percentage, but you must report on it. And you know what? I think there were, I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but I think there were 9%, and today it's like 30%. And the only thing that changed really was reporting. The reporting. So when you start to measure things, you start to, take action.
Absolutely. I'm just going to say hello to Peter from Old London. How are you, Peter? So happy to see you. Hope things are going great across the pond. And Jennifer Davey, thank you so much for tuning in. She says, thank you for hosting this. Appreciate the insights. Such a dynamic for me, leading corp-funded 20 to 40 million engineering programs, but find raising capital under 5 million for a startup is far more work and a different beast.
Yeah. Right? Come to Lighter Capital.
Can't wait to be fully funded and growing. Absolutely. And hello, Jennifer Davey. So happy that you're right down the road from me here in Boston. That's so wonderful. So let's talk about bootstrapping, because one of my favorite bootstrapping stories is, of course, MailChimp, everyone. I bring it up a lot because they were so committed to not taking capital and to growing slowly and growing through customer acquisition and figuring things out along the way. And they sold to the owners of QuickBooks. Was that Intuit or something? Intuit. Yeah, for $12 billion. And I remember, Melissa, hearing him interviewed by Reid Hoffman, the Go VC guy of all, right, on Masters of Scale. And Reid was like, I don't understand, Ben. Why didn't you would have been further and faster if you taken VC money? And Ben was just staying strong in his lane. Nope. And this was about 5 years ago. And so when they sold for that kind of money, I just went, hello, I can't wait to see what you do with those billions.
And what percentage of the company did he and his employees own when it was
quite
sold?
A bit?
Versus,
yeah.
It would probably be most of it if they
absolutely.
Not all of it. So what would be, what would be the difference if they had given away, 10, 20, usually by the time a big exit happens, the founder maybe has less than 20% of the company.
Oh yeah. And so again, something, a small percentage of something is better than 100% of nothing.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
bootstrapping is important, folks, because look at all the time, right, Jennifer? We're leading a corporation with, 20 to 40 million engineering programs, and that was a heavy load. But boy, the time that you have probably put into raising capital is taking your eye off the ball of your business and taking your valuable time and energy away from building your business. So what advice do you have, Melissa, for folks who want to bootstrap? What avenues can they look at and pathways can they look at to build their business and also not get caught up in the lure of raising capital and venture capital, because that's out there a lot too. Oh, you must raise, you must have a seed round. You're not valuable unless you've raised capital.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about not only the hard steps, but the mental mindset steps that founders need to take in order to begin bootstrapping?
Yeah, well, I think thanks to, just what's written in all the glory is about the raise and the valuation of the raise, that founders, it's easy to get caught up in that, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy for a founder to start thinking, that success is measured by how much capital they raise, and not really focused on success should be measured by how much you delight your customers and how much profit you generate.
That's right.
So, and that's because we celebrate more the big rounds and the companies that have become unicorns, and that becomes the end goal instead of creating a really good, profitable company. So there are other avenues. I know fundraising, I don't think anyone likes it. I hate it. And I was a venture capitalist for a long time. I should, be fine with it. But it just one, you have to set up, you have to get ready to get rejected a lot. And that's no fun. And, rejected for something that you love, because usually we're, founders and company leaders are so passionate about their businesses. But on the Lighter Capital side, so Lighter Capital is a revenue-based financing company that was started in 2010. We've done over 1,000 rounds of financing. It's to companies with primarily B2B SaaS, but companies with recurring revenue. And we help companies that sometimes they do go down the venture route, sometimes in conjunction with us, or they were down the venture route before they came to us, or they go down the venture route after us. But a lot of times it's companies that either don't ever want to go down that path, or they won't qualify. And not because they're not good companies, but because their TAM isn't big enough. They're maybe never going to become a unicorn, but they could have a really nice, solid, profitable business.
And folks, on the acronym side, I don't want you having to Google.
Total addressable market. Yep. Total addressable market. Their market size isn't big enough.
And how many times, founders, have you heard that question about what is your market size? Oh, would you shut up about that?
It's interesting to see how many, anyway, we can go on about that too. But our process, the reason I jumped into this, I was on the board, I invested, NAB invested, and I went on their board in 2018 and became the CEO in 2020. I just had never been involved with a company whose customers love them this much. And I think it's because it's a very customer friendly company, but also raising money from us, the application takes about 10 minutes and money can be out in a week or two, because it's all data driven. So, that's to fill out the initial application. And then our underwriters might have some questions. If there's something that doesn't come up in the data, we connect to the financials and the bank account. But it's a very light lift, hence the name Lighter Capital, compared to going down the venture capital route. And
take us through that process, because it's so fascinating. Folks, Lighter Capital is, a revenue-based
financing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so what is that, and how does revenue-based financing work?
So how that works, it's debt, but it's very friendly debt. It's non-dilutive, meaning we don't take any equity. We don't take any control. So we're not taking a board seat. There aren't financial covenants, which can be really hard to manage if you take bank debt. Mm-hmm. Almost every company that we fund wouldn't be able to get bank debt.
Right.
If they could, they probably should. It could be onerous, but it's going to be less expensive.
Listen, if you can get bank debt, you don't really need bank debt. I was a
Well,
banker.
I mean, no. I mean, it's still, it's
A line
debt
of
is
credit,
always, yeah, debt's
absolutely.
always better than equity except in a couple instances. So like if you had, let's say, Ande, I know you've done 4 businesses, but you needed $1 million to take you to your next level.
Right.
And
Inventory, you've got all these orders
yeah,
coming in. There's a
you
timing
wanted to hire a few
period.
salespeople. Yeah, you needed $1 million and you could get it in either debt or equity. You should always, always, always take debt over equity. It's going to be less expensive unless you're getting something, else besides money from that equity that's really big and really worth giving away 10, 20, or 30% of your company. And then it might be worth it to take the equity. Maybe you're getting a strategic partner, or unless the debt is going to be so burdensome to service that it might put your company at risk, so that you wouldn't want to take debt in that case. But the way revenue, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Where does a company have to be for revenue?
So for lighter capital, the minimum revenue is about 200,000 a year in ARR.
Okay.
And this is where, we're not going to be a fit all the times where VC would be a fit. It's just in terms of the amount of money that we can provide. So we can provide for smaller companies up to 1/3 of their revenue, and for larger companies, which we consider 3 million and up to half their revenue. So if you think about a company doing 3 million in revenue, we could give them up to $1.5 million of non-dilutive funding. So there might be a company doing 3 million in revenue that wants to raise 20 million or 30 million. We can't help there because that's not that
but they could do a little bit of a menu with their raise, meaning if they were at, let's say, 5 million a year, they could get a couple million from you, perhaps, and then go on to raise, let's say if they were looking to really grow their business and scale globally, and they probably needed a total of 10 million to do that. Could they do part of it with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And we love equity supported deals. For us, our underwriters look at that as, it's less risk. Most of the companies that we fund don't have equity support. They might have some friends and family money. And then some of them go on and raise venture. We funded a company called, a lot of them do actually. And what's great is if they're able to use our money, Lighter Capital's revenue-based financing money, to grow, they can really change their valuation before they have to go out and do a dilutive round.
Can we just do a quick clap for that, Melissa? And folks, I'm just going to take a moment to have an Andelicious moment, because I love that something fierce. And here's why. If you're ready to expand, but you don't want to give up equity and you're going to need some funding to get to that next level, you're going to get really great favorable terms that will get your business to the next level. And now when you need to go super expansion and you do need that VC capital to do that, or you're bringing a whole new product line to market and you need that VC capital, now you're going to give much less away because of the valuation of your business being so much stronger based on revenue, et cetera. So what are the repayment terms, Melissa?
Well, and I was just going to say, to your last point, we have so many great examples of it.
Oh, good. Let's hear some examples.
Yeah, I love talking about these. There's so many. There's one that's such an extreme example, but Brandon and Danielle, it's a husband and wife team from Seamless AI, which is such a great company. But they took money from us. They took 2 financings from us when they had about 3 million and 4 million in revenue. And they were bootstrapped in some angel investment early on. They couldn't get VC early on because they were a tech company out of Ohio. But by the time they got to 3 million, they were really growing. They were on this rocket ship. They were getting term sheets from venture capitalists. But they didn't want to take the dilution at that time. They were going to have to give away, 20 or 30% of their company at, let's just say it was maybe I don't know what the terms were, but let's just say they were getting a 10x or a 15x, so a 30 or $45 million valuation. But they took $2 million rounds from us, and they used that money to get to over 20 million in revenue. And then they did a round from private equity funds. At that time, they were really able to call the shots, pick their investors. The valuation was in the hundreds of millions, and they were able to take a lot of money off the table. And they talk about this publicly, but they stand up and they say, we're worth hundreds of millions of dollars more because we took this non-dilutive funding, to get from that 3 million to 20-some million in revenue. And we have that story over and over again. There's a company here in Brooklyn called Flip, And they took money from us when they had $1 million in revenue. They grew to 3 million and then took a VC round. In fact, we introduced them to one of the VCs that funded them. That's a lot of what we do when companies are ready to go down that path. We help them, we help them with introductions. We help them with their presentation if they want help there. I spent a lot of time as a VC, so I love doing that piece of it. But it's and then the more common story is the company that took maybe multiple rounds, never had to give away any equity. Maybe they gave some equity to their employees, but never had to give away equity to an investor, and then sold. And maybe the sale wasn't in a unicorn, but it was in the tens of millions, and they owned all the companies.
Come on. Yeah, that's that unicorn talk. Come on, folks. You know your number.
Yeah.
It's going to give you and your family and generations to come, plus help the planet. It's just so lovely. And so, Melissa, the terms are what? So someone comes to you and they're going to get $1 million.
The repayment terms. Yes.
And so is interest, how does all that work?
So most companies want money for longer. So most of our loans tend to be 3 years. We're happy to go shorter. There's less risk shorter, but most companies want it for longer because it's a lower monthly payment. But the way it works is we will say, well, first we'll look at, your risk profile, and depending on the risk profile, we'll say, Ande, okay, we're going to give you $1, and you're going to pay us back over 3 years, depending on where you sit, somewhere between $1.35 and $1.40 over 3 years. If it were in a year, it might be $1.10, but people typically want money longer. So that fee. So you have that fee of 35 cents or 40 cents. That's what it's costing you for that money. So you have to think about, if you're thinking about equity, should I give away $1 of equity? Is that going to be cheaper, than giving, than 35 or 40 cents? That's the way to think of the cost of capital. But then the way the payment works is in our RBF model, which is our revenue-based financing, you pay a percentage of your cash collected revenue until you've paid off that $1.35. So, and it's cash collected on a monthly basis. So it's really good for companies that have seasonal revenue. You don't ever have a big burdensome loan payment that you can't make because it's a percentage of your cash collected revenue in those 3 years. So, we saw it, how well it worked in COVID. We had a company in the lunch delivery space, and really good company doing really well. They delivered lunch to all things. So they got hit pretty hard, like 90% decline in revenue, but the amount they paid us went down by 90%. In the ticketing space, ticketing event, same thing, 88% decline in revenue. The amount they paid us went down by 88%.
And think about the folks with, consumer packaged goods, and they're dealing with inventory and they can't get the product. They can't get anything shipped. They're not sitting there with a balloon payment due, or, venture capital's breathing down their neck. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? They're your percentage of the cash coming in the door. I love those terms. This is wonderful.
And then we do have a standard term loan as well which some companies want that, where it's just a fixed amount every month that's paid off. They want that predictability. So we have both, but it is really friendly. And I mean, our goal, we give them the money, but then we help them. Some companies want a lot of help. Some companies don't want any help. We're unlike in venture, we don't require that you take our help. It's like, here's the money, go grow your company and tell us how we can help. So we have a lot of ways that we help our portfolio companies other than just cash. But, if they grow faster, we do better. Like if we get paid back that $1.35 in 18 months instead of 3 years, that's great for us. The company doesn't pay back more than $1.35, but our IRR is a lot higher if we get paid back in 18 months, or if the company gets acquired early. So, we're doing everything we can to help the company succeed.
And I think the balance sheet for the company looks better too as a result, because that debt's coming down and all their numbers are going to be looking better, and they've got the value of the business, folks. That sits on the asset side of your balance sheet and your owner's equity as well. So, having debt financing gives you and I bring that up, folks, because I was a banker, commercial lender back in the day. So, a lot of times you want to have that nice line of credit to meet payroll or inventory expenses and things like that. They're crunching the numbers. Everybody's crunching and doing the ratios on your business. And so this gives you a cleaner balance sheet and better ratios for
Well,
further
we
fun.
don't have financial covenants, which, coming
Yeah.
from the banker world, that it can just be onerous for a company to have to track those, especially
Yeah.
small businesses, to say, okay, are we violating this covenant? Or, so
Now,
that's,
Melissa, I recommended one of the companies I mentored and continue to mentor to look at when they were raising a pre-seed round, to look at revenue, because they had a lot of revenue coming in, and look at revenue-based financing. And for a very small amount of money, maybe $100K, they were put through the ringer. I mean, oh my gosh, you would have thought they had asked for, 10 million. They were so scrutinized and so
is this from
demoralized.
a bank?
No, from a revenue based finance company. And so this was about 3 years ago. And so I thought, geez, I don't know if this is a really good avenue to take. Talk a little bit about what a founder goes through when you decide if they're credit worthy, so to speak.
Well, it's a simple process. Like I said, our application takes 10 minutes to fill out if you're a slow typer, and then we pull your banking data and your accounting data.
Yep.
And then if everything is smooth, you might get if everything is clear, I should say, you might get a term sheet right after that. But sometimes there might be questions. Right. So the underwriters might say, okay, I mean, one thing that we don't like to see is customer concentration, meaning most of your revenue comes from just a few customers, because we rely on revenue to get paid back. So, but
any company, should be concerned about that too.
Yeah. So sometimes we will fund companies that have customer concentration. I mean, we have a company that we funded. It's a great company. They have 7 customers, but they're government contracts. But that's one where we have to dig in a little. Okay, we see you have customer concentration, which is typically going to be a no, but tell us a little more. And then we'll look at the contracts and, confirm that these are contracts that, aren't at risk of going away, right. Where your typical SaaS, people can renew or not renew at any time. Yeah. But, the process is extremely easy. Where it could get complicated and take more time is if there's just something that doesn't fit. Like sometimes churn might look like it's really big, but in reality, it's not. So we'd have to dig in a little more, because we're also looking at things like churn and margins.
Yep. Also, which are so important. And what I like about this is, for those of you who have a climate tech company with like hard assets, or a consumer packaged good, or here in Boston, we have a lot of the life sciences and biosciences, which are still in R&D stages. But when you are at that point, when you're ready to expand and grow, this is a wonderful option, because you're going to be having the revenue come in. You're going to have that traction. And again, before you go out for that Series A, so you can take it to another level, you want to be able to get the valuation up with a 3-year revenue-based financing option, is how I see it, or even less, 18 months, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of our companies out of Philadelphia, DBT Labs, they took $240,000 in financing from us. They made a lot of progress and got $5 million from Andreessen, and then did a $30 million round from Sequoia, and then a $150 million round, and they became a unicorn. So, but they were able to, get to a point without taking any dilution, or really giving up control, which is a lot of times even a bigger issue for entrepreneurs. Giving up control. They want to grow their business on their terms.
That's right.
And being able to get the business to a point, if you are going to go raise a big VC round, where you get to choose the investors instead of the investors choosing you.
And this is so important. And many founders are at this stage, but they don't understand, the expansion capital they need. They've got the traction, right? But that ability to grow, they get stuck, because they actually need something like you have to help them get to the next level and still hold on to I'm just such a huge fan. Huge fan.
I am too, which is why I took the operating role there. Yeah,
I know, that's what I was going to say.
I love it.
That was my next question. How did you transition out of the VC world into this? How did this opportunity come to you? And you said, "Oh man, I'm throwing my tiara in the ring right away."
Yeah, I love that tiara in the ring. So I was on their board, and I had been an operator before. I said I ran two companies that had successful exits, and then I went into venture for a long time and got to, observe and work with a lot of, good CEOs, see good management, see bad management. So I think I always thought I wanted to, at one point, get back in the operating arena. Now that I've had, VC is a great, venture is a great opportunity to really see a lot of different management styles.
Yeah.
And lighter, it came up that after COVID hit, we needed to bring in a new CEO. We had a CEO who was there for a very short time and didn't have a lending background. And I got very involved in the company when COVID hit. We didn't know what would happen, if the whole book would blow up, if all of our companies would, go out of business and not be able to pay us back. So I ended up getting very involved, and I just, it's one of those things where I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I couldn't stop thinking about, what I thought needed to be done with the company. And I eventually sort of realized if I don't put my hat in the ring here, I'm going to regret it forever.
Oh, I love it. And it's international. Companies from around the world can apply?
So
how does that work?
In the US, we expanded in 2020 to Canada, and then 21 to Australia. So companies have to be domiciled in one of those three countries.
Are you thinking of going to Europe or down to
Not right now.
Okay,
no,
right.
No. I mean, it could. I mean, the reason that we're in Australia is because we had NABS, an investor, National Australia Bank, and we have this strong connection, and we had a strong network there already. And Australia is going really well. So I wouldn't say never. If somebody came to us from one of the European countries and said, okay, we'd like to partner with you, and we already have this network built. But there's actually a lot that goes into, you usually have to get a local source of capital, your source of funding.
Yep.
So our funding comes from a warehouse facility, and we have one in Australia and one in the US. We haven't figured out how to find one provider that will do both. And there's a lot that goes into not just attracting, but maintaining, and also understanding the regulatory environment of each country you go into.
That's
so
right,
there's just a lot more growth for us where we are today.
You're in the best countries for companies, okay, for entrepreneurs. Folks, you know this. Anybody who lives in any of the European countries or in other locations around the world other than Australia, US, and Canada, even just launching a business can be really hard because of all the rules and regulations. And boy, when you get into the money component, it's even it's amazing how hard it can be. So I love that. That's plenty of room to grow and glow and add value to so many companies. And speaking of adding value to companies and female founders especially, let's talk a little bit about how you were in Australia for a minute, and because you said you moved there in 2009, and you co-founded Heads Over Heels, Connections for Growth. And folks, you can visit Heads, HEADS, Over Heels, HEELS.com.au to learn more about this incredible organization. Talk a little bit about who you're serving and why.
Yeah, so it came out of, at that time I had been in venture for 10 years, and I hardly ever saw women pitch me. So it wasn't just that we weren't funding women, they weren't even pitching. But a couple other co-founders, Janet Menzies, she runs Amazon for Australia now, and Alex Burrell, who's running a public company in Australia. We came together at the time and said, we want to see some change here. What can we do? And what's the missing link? And what we decided to go after, it came out of, I was a member when I was an entrepreneur in the Valley of an organization called Forum for Women Entrepreneurs, FWE. And I got so much out of that. And what I mainly got out of it, they had a lot of education events, but what I mainly got out of it was just a strong network. So Heads Over Heels came about was formed with the idea of how do we sort of fast track these networks for women, because in general, women aren't as connected as men to the types of connections they need to accelerate their business. So what we do, it's a really, it's a great model. It's a selective process to become a Heads Over Heels portfolio company. And then if they're selected, they will present in front of our connectors. We call them connectors. And these are senior business leaders, men and women, who are willing to open up their networks to these entrepreneurs. And you've run for companies. Sometimes it's that one meeting or that one
Oh,
warm introduction that changes everything. It was the
Melissa,
customer. It was so.
I'm a huge believer that social capital is much more valuable than financial capital.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and lots of times you have everything what people are looking for. They just don't know you or about you. And how do you get those introductions if you don't have somebody like a heads over heels organization to help you reach the right people who are like, where have you been my whole life? I've been looking for you. There's just incredible. Or it's one person goes, you're not a fit for me, but you know what, who would love you? And then they introduce you, and all of a sudden you've got a network, and your network is your net worth, that you're going, dang,
I love that. Network is the net worth. Yeah. Well, and this is very deliberate. So Ande, if you were pitching, and the companies go through a lot of pitch training, you'll give your 7-minute on, this is what we do, and this is what I'm looking for. I am looking for introductions to banks, these banks specifically. I am looking for introductions to telcos. I am looking for, and then what happens is, in the room, the people who are in the room have connections, and they'll say, I can do this. And it becomes almost a contest, like who's going to do the most introductions. So the CEO will leave the event with somewhere between 30 and 60, offers of introductions or other things they've asked for.
Warm introductions, folks.
And they're not, most of them are going to end up in nothing, but maybe one or two. And now after doing this for more than a decade, there's so many examples. And if you have a minute, I'll give you one, because it just like pinpoints what we do. But there was a company, it's called ProSpend. She was called Expense Manager. Sharon knew. She came to heads over heels. She bootstrapped it. She does basically the expense and payables management for mid-market companies, and totally bootstrapped. She had 100,000 in revenue at the time she came to heads over heels, and she'd been trying to get to MyOb, which is it's an accounting platform for small and mid-sized businesses. She'd been trying to get in there just to partner. She wanted to get on their partner page, and had been trying for, I don't know, a year or two. And that was one of her asks, that she wanted an introduction to MyOb. So in one of our connectors is Naomi Simpson. She was a shark on Shark Tank in Australia, and she knew the CEO of MyOb, Tim Breed. So she made that intro. Took her 2 seconds. Tim, because it came from Naomi, responded right away. Sharon, the CEO of ProSpend, got introduced to the partnership team. And because the introduction came from the CEO, Tim, they looked at it, and it wasn't, if it was something they didn't want, they would have thrown it out. They said, yeah, this is exactly what we want. She got that. Within a year, her revenues were $1 million. Now she's at $5 million. And she just credits it back to that, like that getting into MyOb changed everything. And she'd been trying to get in there, but the effort that it took on the connector side, Tim and Naomi's side, was literally like seconds, minutes from each of them. So it was a very efficient way for them to have an impact.
Oh my God, I got tears in my eyes, everybody. Excuse me, I'm having a founder journey moment. Was a big woohoo at the end there, because come on. I mean, the opportunity to just get up in front of people and ask. And, Julia's hitting the nail on the head here too. She echoes that. Allyship can be with social capital and making introductions, not only business services and capital. You can help someone out so quickly, because so many of these great companies are founded by founders who wanted to solve a problem, are uniquely and ideally qualified to solve that problem.
Yeah.
They just don't have the connections to take their incredible business. And what a great feeling for you and the heads over heels team to know that you're just adding so much wind to people's sails. Oh, and to women's sales especially. I love that.
It's so rewarding, and it's a not-for-profit. We don't charge the entrepreneurs anything. We never will. It's funded by great corporates: NAB, Macquarie, EY, Steadfast, Gilbert and Tobin in Australia. But it is really rewarding, and it's great to see so many results.
We need you here in the U.S.
Well, actually, we've done 2 events now in the U.S. We found in COVID that this works virtually. So I will be reaching out to you, Ande, because our challenge is, the big work is getting the connectors like you in the room. We've got lots of entrepreneurs. And that's where, there's
connections happen, folks. I've had folks, guests on the show, founders on the show, or folks even in the comment section who someone saw and connected with, and major things happen just by providing the platform, the opportunity for folks to have that calls to action, and someone responds. It's amazing. I love that. I get goosebumps from that, Melissa. Seriously, that has to be like something that just fuels you for all the work you do in the world.
It does. I love the way you say that. It fuels me.
Yeah, it really
Absolutely.
does. So we're going to be wrapping up, but I want to know a little bit about what does success look like for you? You are involved in so many wonderful aspects of helping founders grow and glow with their businesses, but you're bringing it back to you both personally and professionally. What does success look like for Lighter Capital, but also for Melissa Widner?
Well, for Lighter Capital, we are in such a privileged position in that our job is to work with the most fascinating people on the planet and help them. I mean, how lucky are we? So we get to talk to them all day and help them, and they're appreciative. I mean,
Yeah.
it's what I think once you get into any role like this, whether it's venture capital or working with entrepreneurs and helping entrepreneurs, it's hard to do anything else because they really
Yeah.
are a different breed of people, and getting to spend your time with
Ah,
them and
pure
is a
deliciousness.
privilege.
Yeah.
So it's an absolute privilege. But Lighter is a venture-backed company.
Mhm.
We're profitable now and haven't had to take external funding from a venture, external equity funding for a while. But we'd like to someday get an exit for our investors, some of whom have been with us for a very long time.
Oh, that's
For on the just the lighter capital side,
yeah.
to be able to help more entrepreneurs
Yeah.
and to have more stories like we have with Seamless and Flip and even Sharon's company. Sharon's actually a Lighter Capital customer. She's at 5 million in revenue and never
Oh,
took any dilution. So
this is wonderful news. What final piece of advice do you have for founders before I pop you in the green room and wrap up the show?
well, one of my big pieces of advice, and it's something I didn't do when in my first two companies that I ran, and I do now, is get a network of other founders. Make sure you're connected. There's a lot of groups out there. Lighter actually provides. We have CEO groups that we provide for our CEOs, but that is so vital, and that's where it's so difficult to run a company and be a founder, and to be able to have those people you can go to who are going through the same thing. So if you don't have that already, get it. And there's a lot of groups out there that that do cost money. I belong to a few that I pay money for, and I think it's good money. But there's also ones that don't. We offer that for Lighter Capital CEOs at no charge. But find your group that you
Oh,
can
yeah.
turn to, because it's not easy.
No, it's the best support group out there because your family members, your loved ones, your friends are clueless about what you're going through.
Yeah.
In fact, often they want to be supportive, but they're really watching you, biting their nails and thinking it's a train wreck
Why are you
about to
doing this?
happen.
Right.
Oh my, like, why would you put yourself? What do you mean you're going back
Yeah.
into the office? All of that. And but founders know, and that's the best feeling, is just having somebody know what you're going through. It's delicious. Melissa, thank you so much. You added so much value to Founders Journeys today. And also, I'm just so happy for you and your work in the world and the way you're contributing. What a wonderful vehicle for so many founders out there to not just, grow and expand further, but increase their valuation for that next round. You're really, if they need one, you're really a tremendous asset and welcoming platform for so many founders who probably don't know that you're out there. So I can't wait to tell more folks about you.
Well, thank you, Ande. I think this is the first time that I've done a podcast with a 4-time entrepreneur. So this was a real privilege for me. Thank you.
Reluctant, just, grooving through life, folks. Is
Yeah.
how I founded my business. But thank you so much. I'm going to pop you in the green room and wrap up the show real quickly. I got to tell you, folks, I am charged up and fired up from this conversation with Melissa, knowing that there's so many other options out there, and this one being Lighter Capital. What a great way to grow your business non-dilutively. Is that a word? I don't know. But let me share with you who's coming up next on the show on Friday. We are chatting with Kirk Fernandez. And Kirk, this is Friday, March 21st at 12 p.m. ET. He's the co-founder of Merit, a tech mentorship and recruiting platform for the under-networked. And Merit's mission is to democratize the professional network. Like, this is what we were just talking about, right? By giving every knowledge worker in the world a world-class network. And they already have 6,000 members, the majority of whom are women and people of color, and it's self-funded by its community and team. It's going to be such a delicious conversation. And how do you know whenever I post a new show? That's right. You're a member of the Startup Life Live meetup group. Be sure to join that so you can get all the alerts. And I have all the links to the show notes for today are in the show notes. Heads over heels, go check them out. Go check out Lighter Capital. Go connect with Michelle wherever she's glowing. All the links are in the show notes. They're everywhere on social media. Until then, I want to remind you guys, that's right. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem. And as we say here in Boston, you are wicked smarter than you think. You've got this, everyone. Wishing you a delicious day everywhere you glow. Mwah. Be sure to stop by and say hi and social to me. Cheers.